I'm trying to remember the earlier, or not remember so much, but step back into the shoes, the earlier version of myself when I was raised up in Maine in particular. Because I gained knowledge early on about things in life that I actually wanted to pass on to my kids. And so here in the United States, where they say that there is, you're protected under your beliefs, your religion, the foundation of your beliefs, that's not true. And here's why I'm saying that. Because it doesn't matter, even if you are raised in the same town as someone that you ultimately connect with and bear children with, what goes on and before all that happens, the things that happen in each household set the foundation of beliefs, okay? It has to. So, for instance, although I was not born and raised up into a certain point, the Catholic religion that came at a later point in time, those earlier days prior to being introduced to the Catholic religion, I was raised primarily by my mother and my father's core belief system that they carried with them from their households, okay? A lot of it is pretty much the same. So there's varying factors, of course, because it's two separate households. So in my father's upbringing and household, his mother was born and raised in the Great Depression days. She lived to be 100 years old. She carried with her great knowledge and wisdom from those days. And if you wanted to spend the time and truly listen to what she had to say, you would have learned a great deal of knowledge from those days. And I did. So, not only that, but people that came to visit her and people that lived with her because she had boarders, people that boarded rooms in her house, and they were all older people, not younger people, older people. And if you took the time to actually listen to what they said, and these people were like people that were bankers and lawyers, and they worked for the Department of Social Services, and they ended up, they lived through the Great Depression, and they ended up with nothing. And they, ultimately ended up renting rooms in her house, okay? And so every summer we would go to her house so that we could spend time with our father. And he worked, so it was more convenient for us to just stay at our grandmother's house, where we were greatly supervised by a lot of adults, mostly older adults. Not the 20s and the 30s, but like much older adults, over the age of 50. And so I picked up a lot of my learning early on learning from her household during the summers. And there were people that, like I said, they were bankers back in those days. They were lawyers back in those days. So I learned a lot of things from them. And as an opposite flow, in my mother's house, she didn't board people at her house, but she had 6 children to care for. And she was a single mother for a long time, so she had to, make 2 ends meet to provide for us. So we were not wealthy by any means, but we knew how to survive. That is one thing for certain, okay? And so on either end, the mechanism for survival was the greatest mechanism because, like I said, my grandmothers on both sides lived through the Great Depression. They were born into it and they lived through it. And the older people that I used to talk to the most would always say, we were born in the Great Depression and we know what it's like to go from having something to nothing and still finding a way to survive. And they would also say, you were born just like we were in the era of war. And if you take away anything from life, always find a way to survive because there's no core essence in this country that says, it's like the wavering stick. We're going to go, if we go 1 degree forward, we need to look back at the 1 degree, on the other end of the stick where we came from and readjust ourselves so we don't go back. They don't do that here in the United States. They just full force move forward doing all these crazy ass things. And they never stop and reflect back and say, hold on, we've already been here before. We're moving in the wrong direction. We got to readjust, recalibrate, readjust. That's what happens in a household. That's what happens in a small business, in a medium-sized business, and even in a large business. But we're talking like this major corporation, which is the United States of America. They don't readjust on any type of scale, and it's just totally dysfunctional. So the only thing that you can do is survive, learn to survive. And money really is not the object. And if you view money as the object, your chances of survival when shit comes to pasture is gonna, you're not gonna survive. You're not gonna be able to do it all on your own. You're gonna constantly be leaning on other people, and the more you lean on them, the greater the burden is on the people that know how to survive, and that's not right. So the basic learnings have to be survival, or it was with us, okay? Those are the things that I wanted to carry through and share with my children. But I did to a large degree, but it was not firmly instilled amongst them, okay? I developed my own belief system at a very, very young age. And when I was ultimately introduced into the Catholic religion at I don't know, I must have been 13 or so. I mean, we got baptized probably when I was 9 years old, 10, between 9 and 12. And then, they started that whole Sunday school crap with us and First Communion and all that crap. I went along with it because that was the rules in my household, but that was not my belief system. I already developed my own belief system at a very, very young age, which I wanted to share with my children, and I never got a chance to share that with my children because the overriding factor in my household where my children resided was, the pull, the push towards him and his family. And throughout all this time, the weight and the emphasis has been on his family, not my family. But when I look at his family in comparison to my family My family has much greater value and knowledge that they carried forward throughout all those time frames than his family could ever gain in knowledge. Because, you know, they're negative and they do things against my grain of belief, okay? So part of my belief system mimics a lot to a belief system that no one has yet to tap into, or that I know is tapped into, or that is carried forth. And I think it is because they extinguished that belief system. And so part of my belief system, and I used to have, it's almost like a warrior's code. And I used to sit in the woods and I'd say it, and it was pretty lengthy. And um, I'm trying to go back on my earlier, I call it my robe, okay? My earlier robe where I developed all those things, and I used to say all those things. And it kept me centered and focused all the time, regardless. And I never focused on money. I was never, ever, ever focused on money. It's dirty, it's filthy. People use it for the worst things. It's never used for anything good. And other than I love accounting and finance and counting things and coming up with, you know, the solution by running spreadsheets and stuff like that, I was never really focused in on money. It really has no, you know, it's I don't know, it's just a requirement to gain the things that you need to survive, and that's the way I look at it. So I'm trying to go back and remember when I sat in the woods as a child, I had my own warrior's code. And that was my code, and I don't know where it came from. But it went something like this. I will always honor my mother and my father first, for they collectively and combined make up the whole of me. I will always try to gain more knowledge and insight, even when they are angered at me, even when they become upset at something that I have done where they have little understanding of why I did those things. I will still honor them. I will try my best to help them, even if it's with the small things, to make things easier for them, because I can see the burden on their backs. I will always recognize them first and foremost in the essence of my blood, because without them I would not be standing here or sitting here before you, and I used to talk to the trees. Sitting in the woods, I would not be able to sit or stand before you as I am in this flesh if it was not for their combination of blood. So the actual warrior's code that I developed when I was a really little kid, and I knew it. It's really, really long. And some days I'm just riding along and I say it to myself, and it always starts with I. And I became fascinated, after I learned how to read, which that was a task all in itself, because I'd go to I didn't know how to read until I was like in 8th grade. It was bad. And I would go to the library, though, and I would spend hours and hours at the library, and I became very, very intrigued, almost to, I wouldn't say obsessed, but I always went to the books that had something about the Huron and the Sioux, and I mapped it all out under the Iroquois. at a very young age. And I spent uh, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth grade in one town. First and second were in one town. Third, fourth, fifth, sixth were in another town. So at different schools. And then finally, seventh through 12th in this other town. But the town in the middle, they had this library, and I loved it. And I loved the library ladies that worked there. And so I'd go in there, and they had this secret room that had these really, really old books. And children really were not allowed in that room because of the age of these books, but they would let me in. And there was this great big recliner chair, not like one that you push back, but like a big reading chair. And I could sit in that chair, and from, the back end of it, nobody could ever tell that I was sitting in that chair. So when people walked into the library, and if they looked in through the window into that room, they could not tell that I was sitting in that chair. And I would be able to read all these, not read, but through the pictures, read using only the pictures as my reading tool, go through all these books. And then I would ask, if I couldn't understand something, like, who are these people? The library ladies would help me with that. But I was really focused in on the Huron and the Sioux. And later started really only through pictures, trying to gather the connection to the Iroquois. And so my early staged belief system that I developed on my own really is more connected to, like I always say to myself, of all the blood types out there, I favor the most. I favor the most the Huron and the Sioux. Engulfed, of course, by the knowledge and the presence of the Iroquois, because that was my, that's where I picked up everything as a kid. So, but I never got a chance to share any of that stuff. I never got a chance to take my kids to my, when I was a kid and say, yep, and I used to walk these railroad tracks and look for this, and I used to go hiking on this trail, and, these were my favorite spots as a kid. I never got to do any of that stuff because I got strapped down in Livingston County, New York. So my kids never got a chance to get to know me, the original me, just the me that was present in their household. And I had to watch myself. I constantly walking on eggshells, not to upset the other. And when I look back, it was so dysfunctional and so abusive, where to the point where if me and the kids were just cracking up laughing over something stupid, it's almost like it was like a major upset in the house. Like, oh my God, he pulled into the driveway. Now we gotta shut our fucking mouths and make ourselves busy and just stop being who we are. We had to stop having fun as soon as he pulled into the driveway, or when he was in the house. We couldn't just be us. And that really is abuse. Okay? It's all about him, it's all about him, it's all about him. The center of everything has to be about him. And that's not a functional family, okay? It's a dysfunctional family. And the tyrant, bullying, the constant, anything we did, if we wanted to sit and have a family movie time together, it's basically we had to watch what he wanted to watch. and wait until he left so that we could watch what we wanted to watch. And it was so one-sided. It's so sickening, just so sickening. Everything. And how Livingston County allowed all that stuff to, they relished him. And they did not ever once stop to think about why I wanted to get out of that so bad. And he's never lived on the streets. He's never been without. He's never been, left without any amenities in life. He has all the resources at his disposal. And the only people that were harmed in the process of the decisions made in Livingston County, me and my kids. Not him and her kids from her previous marriage. And that shit blows my mind. That this stuff is allowed to transpire in the United States. So I would like to say, adding on to my obsolete laws, I really think they need to mark religion, any protection under the law for religion and beliefs in the United States. They need to mark that all that shit that any law case, anything that has ever been brought before the law on religion, mark that fucking shit obsolete. Mark it obsolete. I don't believe none of the fucking shit. I don't buy into any of the ways of Livingston County because I was raised in Maine. And I believe more, my beliefs are firmly embedded in the state of Maine, where, you don't waste shit. You try to get multiple uses out of the same thing before you discard it. You don't litter. That's how I was raised. It was highly shunned upon. I've never, ever thrown shit out the window. Ever. I was raised in Maine. We don't do that stuff. When I grew up, if somebody ate a popsicle and threw their stick on the ground, you can bet your bottom dollar anybody else that saw that while they were walking on the street would come right over and say, now pick your stick up. And you find a trash can to put that in. You did not litter in the state of Maine when I was growing up. That's not the way it is here in New York. We grew up, I might have grown up poor, but we had the highest standards. You cannot compare that shit to people here in New York. They didn't grow up the same way. That was in my house did not grow up the same way. To not be so wasteful. So, they need to mark religion, anything to do with churches, any laws of protection for religion, obsolete. If I didn't get a chance to share my belief system with my kids that I developed all on my own when I was a child, guess what? All your fucking laws on religion are now obsolete. Bing, bang, boom. It takes one occurrence. Welcome to the new structured world of the United States. Because as soon as all your laws are marked obsolete, then we start all over, ground zero. And restructure things. Do you want to do that? You want to go through all that shit again? You need to take a good look at what the fuck you're doing out there. Because that's how easy it's going to be. One instance where you have a law that protects people against acts of violence towards others based on race, religion, national origin, blah, blah, blah. Just one instance where the law fails to step in to protect those people, obsolete. It's as easy as it goes. I don't give a shit whatever happens from this point forward. I'll bring up any case measured up against what I've been through, mark that shit obsolete. Think about it. It's how easy it's going to be to restructure everything.